Hmm. Good evening or good morning, wherever you are in the world. I'm Regina Yao, and I'm the founder and president of the Pixel Project, and I'm moderating the 12th and final YouTube session of the 10th fall edition of our Read for Pixels campaign. Yes, it's the 10th anniversary of Read for Pixels. Now, today's YouTube session is also our 21st Read for Pixels live stream author panel since we started hosting panels in 2018. The Pixel Project created these multi-author panel sessions to be an accessible resource for writers interested in writing about female characters and approaching themes such as misogyny, sexism, gender, and violence against women with depth, empathy, and accuracy. So we have an interesting topic for today's discussion, and it's tackling the terrors of #MeToo, a 10-year retrospective on sexism, misogyny, and violence against women in horror. So here to participate in this discussion are three award-winning horror authors who have written some of the best English language horror in the world for the past decade or more. So we're just going to go by alphabetical order. So starting with Angela, who's right below me. So Angela Yuriko Smith is an American poet, Stoker-nominated author, and co-publisher of Space and Time magazine, a publication that has been printing speculative fiction, art, and poetry since 1966. That's a long time. So join and she competes as an iron writer and helps raise an exquisite corpse at spaceandtime.net. Next to me is Linda D. Addison, and Linda is the award-winning author of 5 collections, including How to Recognize a Demon Has Become Your Friend, and she's the first African-American recipient of the Horror Writers Association Bram Stoker Award, and she has received the HWA Mentor of the Year Award and the HWA Lifetime Achievement Award. Linda D. Addison is a co-editor of Sycorax's Daughters, an anthology of horror fiction and poetry by African American women. And last but not least, Paul Tremblay, right below Linda, it has won the Bram Stoker British Fantasy and Massachusetts Book Awards, and is the author of the Paul Barris Club, Survivor's Song, The Cabin at the End of the World, A Head Full of Ghosts, and other novels and collections. His essays and short fiction have appeared in the Los Angeles Times, New York Times, and numerous years' best anthologies. He has a master's degree in mathematics and lives outside Boston with his family. And aside from joining today's panel, Angela, Linda, and Paul have donated some super exclusive goodies to the stash of author treats we have up as perks for donors at the Read for Pixels 10th anniversary Rally Up fundraising page. So let's talk about Angela's first. So Angela, this is for all authors, speculative fiction authors worldwide. So if you write horror, science fiction, and or fantasy, and you're looking for more opportunities to get your name out there, Angela has 2 different types of goodies for you. The first is the Exercise of Rights bundle, which has a pre-recorded appearance on an Exercise Your Rights online talk show, which has hosted the likes of, let's see, I've hosted the likes of Lee Murray, Alma Katsu, Colleen Anderson, Maxwell I. Gold, Kyle Toucher, I. Jiang, and Linda, who's next to me. And also one written interview with links to supplement your appearance, and one audio-only podcast edition to reach a different audience. And the bonus is you get 1 full-page black and white ad in Space and Time magazine. So Exercise Your Rights is an online talk show where authors can talk about their journeys to success as an author so far, and it's usually booked up months in advance. And the show will be pre-recorded and aired on the next available show date. And the donor is also free to give this opportunity to someone else if they wish. And the goodie number 2 is Opportunities for Authors, which is Angela's subscription, which is a weekly calendar mail out where subscribers get sent a full month of open submission calls, grants, opportunities basically sent to their email. It is now subscribed to by authors in 50 states and I think 36 countries worldwide, right, Angela? And then there's Linda's goodies. So Linda has a really cool goodie bundle. It's exclusive to donors in the US, and there's only one of this bundle. So here are the books in the bundle. There'll be a copy of the Pixel Project's Giving the Devil His Due charity anthology, the special edition, which is now out of print. So basically, you can only get it from, whenever one of our authors offers it. And this time it's Linda. And Linda is going to tuck in a handwritten and signed original poem for the donor. And she's also curated a set of signed and personalized books that she has edited, or anthologies edited by others that contains her work. And it's a mix of fiction, nonfiction, and poetry for your reading pleasure. And there's a whole bunch of books here. There's 6 books in total. And in the interest of time, we're just going to give you the link to go to our fundraising page instead of me reading all of this out. And Linda's also tucked in some really cute swag, including the signed dust jacket from the Out of Print Animated Objects, which is Linda's first collection, and some bookmarks and a refrigerator magnet set which glows in the dark just in time for Halloween, and a pen from How to Recognize a Demon Has Become Your Friend, and a signed collector's card of Linda from TUSCON Science Week SF convention. And Paul's goodies. Paul has donated some really cool goodies. And it's basically 2 unique versions of his best-selling novel, The Cabin at the End of the World. Now, if you're a movie buff, you will remember that it came out as a movie earlier this year as well. And one of the editions is a hardcover edition with annotations on Post-it notes and a letter from Paul. And another one is the SSD Publications Luxe Edition, which has totally sold out its 400 copy print run, and both are gone. We basically posted it on the we posted it on the fundraising page, and it's just gone. 2 people have just whoosh taken it up, and basically we would like to thank both donors. One is Robert Addington, and the other is a donor who wishes to remain anonymous. So thank you both so much. And so right now, as an update, we have raised $8,855 so far towards our $10,000 goal. And that's 88% of the way there. And we might do a stretch goal later on. We will announce this if we do a stretch goal, because there's still October coming up and we still have a whole pile of goodies, including Linda's goodies, Angela's goodies. Cynthia Pelayo still has some handwritten poems up on there. Plenty. We've moved all the horror goodies up in honor of today's panel session. So we have Tuckerizations from Tim Levin, who will make you a minor character in his next horror novel, and he'll probably make sure you get a really horrifying fate between the pages. And Alan Baxter will do the same thing. Just head on over to our fundraising page, and you'll see what we have available for horror fans. So right now, let's move on to the discussion session. But before we do that, you as the audience will also be able to ask Linda, Angela, and Paul questions today. Just make sure you're logged into YouTube so that you can type your questions into the chat box to the right of the screen, where Anusha Kandasivam, who's today's producer and chat box moderator, will relay them to me to read out to Linda, Angela, and Paul. So let's get started with the panel session. Now let's have an introduction here to horror and what we're talking about today. So horror as a genre addresses the deepest fears of societies and cultures and allows us to explore, deconstruct, and overcome these fears in a safe, cathartic, and entertaining way. Horror as a genre in both modern and folk storytelling has also conventionally been unkind to women and other female figures. Fortunately, things seem to be changing because we have been seeing the rise of more female-centric horror that doesn't make its female characters two-dimensional fodder for monsters of both the human and supernatural kind. However, the patriarchy is still far from being eliminated in much of horror. So when the Pixel Project created the Read for Pixels campaign as part of our work to end violence against women, we did so because we recognized that storytelling, and storytellers, including authors such as Linda, Paul, and Angela, play a key role in awareness raising when it comes to difficult social issues such as violence against women. However, we were and still are keenly aware that popular genre fiction, including horror, reflects the sexism, misogyny, and violence against women across society, and in many cases play a role in perpetuating these issues by normalizing such beliefs. In honor of the 10th anniversary of the Read for Pixels campaign, today's panel will be discussing how horror has progressed and changed over the past decade with regards to sexism, misogyny, and violence against women in the genre's stories and books, as well as what the horror community, including authors, readers, publishers, and fandoms, can do about it. So with that in mind, let's get the discussion started. So all three of you have been writing horror for a decade or more. Am I right? I think so. More than a decade, right? And your books and stories have feminist sensibilities and or are excellent examples of how to write compelling and complex female characters in a genre that hasn't always been great to women and girls. So question number one, which is also a Captain Obvious question. Do you think there have been any changes, or indeed any change at all, in the way horror novels and stories have handled these issues, sexism, misogyny, and violence against women, over the past 10 years? So let's start with Linda.
Hi, yes. I do think there has been change. I mean, to me, I would say there is still work to be done. But a lot of the change has come from different directions. One, there's a lot more women writing in horror, and that alone doesn't mean that it's not. I mean, as a woman, you still have to be very conscious of not picking up what society has taught you. You have to be aware of that in order to not write that kind of stereotype. But the fact that women are writing now from all kinds of different social areas or groups is I think helping a lot. If you look at even what's on some of the for the Horror Writers Association, like the final ballot or the recommendation list, now and 10 years ago, vast difference. And that means that the readership, people who are reading are also reading the same books. So that's one thing. I mean, I could talk about other things, but let Angela and Paul say it. But I think the fact that more women are writing and publishing is making a statement about not writing these kinds of stereotypical places.
Just a question about that, following from that, before we go on to Angela, which is, you said there are more women writing. Are there also more women editing horror now?
I don't know if there's as many a biggest jump in that as there is with the women writing, but there are women who are editing. They're editing, like Angela, magazines, anthologies. My feeling, and maybe Angela can answer this better, is that hasn't increased as much as the women being published has, to me.
Okay, so Angela, what are your thoughts about women writers and all that?
I think over the last decade, I think we've seen, I mean, and this is my perspective, but an explosion in places for women in horror. I feel like growing up, we were either the end of the knife, or the final girl, or the witch. We always got to be the witch, or the dead mother that came back to life. Like we always had these horrible roles. But now there's so many women in horror that are resilient. And honestly, I just finished one of your books, Paul. Mary was one of them, just resilient. Like she goes through a lot of horror, like horrific things, and she keeps going. She's not a victim. And I think that dialogue, that it's the new trope of we are not victims. We don't have to be victims. So in answering the editor thing, I feel like there is, but that's probably because I just know a lot of female editors, like Lindy Ryan and Lee Murray and, Naching Tikat. Like, I think that's pretty much everybody I know is a woman editor. So I'm thinking about it.
Yeah. And Alan Datlow is one of the legendary horror.
Yeah, how did I not say that name first? I'm so sorry, Ellen.
Okay, so Paul, what are your thoughts about the last 10 years?
Oh, I mean, well, Linda and Angela's answers are, very eloquent and uh, excellent observations. I don't know. I mean, it's hard to say. I mean, I think with what Linda had said, like, still miles to go, of course, is the caveat for everything that we're discussing. Um, and, I think it's cool that we are seeing, more horror is being published. I think I came across a stat recently, like 70% more books published under horror. And that is, I don't know if that's just including like the quote unquote big publishers, but so many more of these voices that are being published now are from women and own voices, and people of color, et cetera. I would say anecdotally, just thinking back 10 years, like or when I was first in the HWA until about like almost like 2010. And even online, like you would see like people have their list of favorite horror writers and they're almost all male. And it would be very, I don't have to tell you, it'd be so common because I can still remember it. Someone just saying, "Oh, I really don't like women horror writers because they don't whatever, like whatever sort of stereotype of the woman horror writer is." And at that point, like a few people would be like, "What?" But it wouldn't, it would be so common. It would be kind of like, oh. So as far as change goes, I'm happy to say that now, like a comment like that would not be allowed to stand.
We've
Yeah.
seen that, right, Paul? In the last 12 months, there were a couple of kerfuffles that, we're not naming names here.
Right.
People
Yeah,
can
yeah.
find out, but, they're a couple of the old guard, I think,
Yeah,
who
no,
were having tantrums on Facebook, and everyone was just, please don't. You're embarrassing yourself.
yeah. I mean, I guess the last thing I would add to that is like, the hopeful and also the infuriating part was like you were hearing this 10 or 15 years ago, but hearing the same message, but now happily the reaction to that message is much different and much more sort of like solidarity in like, and fighting for what's right, obviously.
Yeah, I'm actually pretty impressed with the horror community and the way it was handled, those tantrums, because like in fantasy, like there's this discussion that's going on like recently. It's not a new discussion, but basically someone pointed out that the best of fantasy lists are still like mainly white male authors. And it keeps being white male authors. And when people point out that no, actually fantasy is a lot more diverse now, the fanboys will start whining about, no, but well, nobody wants to read the same 10 authors all the time anyway. So, and it's off-putting, right? With these best of lists, if they keep using the same authors and you don't show how diverse it is. So other authors who are women or who are BIPOC, who are non-binary or gay or or just not male, not cis, not white, are not getting the boost that they need, and so it becomes this whole cycle thing. But it looks like it has advanced more in horror because people are actually coming out and pushing back in public and saying, no, things have changed. You can't just stay the same. It has to change. Things have to change, right, or the genre is gonna die. So I can't believe I said that right. Things have to change or it's gonna die. But it's true because it's fiction. It has to move with the times. Anyway, so let's move on to the next part of the discussion. So I'm gonna just say a little bit to give context to what we're discussing next. So horror figures and tropes have always been part of storytelling and the folklore fabric of many countries and cultures. And they are usually used as cautionary tales to enforce social norms. So for modern horror, we could argue that since Mary Shelley put pen to paper to bring us Frankenstein's monster, one of the most enduring horror icons to fictional life, horror authors and creators have used stories and storytelling for tackling important social issues. However, while we've seen plenty of critique of everything from racism to consumerism in classics such as The Night of the Living Dead, it seems that the portrayal of women has remained problematic, and issues such as sexism, misogyny, and violence against women continue to be used as convenient shortcut tropes by many horror authors and creators. Indeed, horror novels and movies have long been criticized as contributing to the further normalization of extreme violence against women as entertainment. Question is, do y'all think there has been any improvements on this front in the last 10 years, with the Me Too movement kicking off a lot of discussion about these issues, as well as exposing some big name male authors as misogynists and abusers? So let's start with Linda.
Yeah, I think certainly that movement has made an impact. I think that when it first started, there was the hope that it would make huge changes. And when some big names were called out for the use of the female body for their own good, whether or not, they were going to actually further the actual talent of the person. But there's still a lot of things. I don't know if it's called the Whisper Network or something like that, where people talk about things that are going on in the background that are not cool, and more of that kind of thing is coming out, and more needs to come out. And I know that it's a hard decision for someone creatively to do, because of being afraid of maybe repercussions. Like if you say something about, if you're an actress, if you dissed and you're tagged as difficult, if you're a woman and you do the same kind of behavior that shows strength and focus of vision, then you might be tagged as difficult. And so I think that is still some influencing that needs to change. But I think that the Me Too movement is a big part of giving birth to sharing to people, saying, yo, this seemed like it was a cool person, a cool production company, a cool idea, but let me tell you what's really going on. And I think more of that actually still needs to be done. The sense of being protected as a woman in saying these things, so that you don't get thrown out as difficult or unbendable, is the challenge. It's really still the challenge.
Angela?
Yeah, I agree. I think when things are allowed to just kind of fester in the dark, that's when it's everybody just thinks it's okay. And that's kind of what the movement has done, I think, is it's been like you hear somebody else talk about it, and it reminds you, even, because I think sometimes you just forget that that's even happened to you. You don't want to remember it. But somebody else remembering it and being brave enough to talk about it, it's easier to support. And after you see a couple people, maybe you might feel more willing and braver to come out with it. So I feel like just it's been strengthening everybody involved, and also sending a message of, this ain't cool. This can't happen anymore, because somebody might talk. There was just on the no names mentioned, but this week I was just reading about something like that from somebody who I really enjoyed as a performer. And I read all that, but it was the thing that the woman said was, at the time, because that's always the things, well, why didn't you talk about it then? And she said, at that time he was so big and I was nobody, who's going to listen to me? And I think having that voice, that ability to come out, has opened it up more. There's obviously more work to do. There's probably always going to be, unfortunately, more work to do, but I think this is a really great start, that this is even accessible.
Paul?
Yeah, I don't have a whole lot more to add. I mean, so from the point of view of, an ally and a bystander, it's like silence, like, I get it. I think everybody gets it. Silence is easy, right? I mean, from the bystander point of view, it's hard to speak up. It's hard to speak out, and, I have regrets from things that I've seen or happened from 15, 10 years ago, et cetera. So I'm thankful now that, I mean, even, living with, my wife and my daughters, like the Me Too thing, like I knew things were awful, but like it always hit me in the head, like, holy crap, I didn't realize it was that awful. Although I probably did, but didn't necessarily want to admit it. And to make it sort of, to build off a little bit what Linda was saying, a little bit, more unique to sort of horror in the writing community. Like it's even more important, that the whisper networks or just the sharing of information is cultivated and supported, because as shitty as the government support of sexual harassment suits in the workplace. Right? We don't have unions. We don't have writers' unions. We don't have a supposed body that we can go to make official complaints. So it's that much easier for predatory behavior to sort of exist, especially on us writers who are like alone and trading on dreams that our work would be published someday, et cetera. So I think, all writing communities, I think, are especially fraught with those misbehaviors sort of taking root because, it's hard. The only people who are going to stand up and protect ourselves is going to be other writers within the community.
Yeah. We, speaking of whisper networks, we actually have people writing to us going, don't thinking about it, don't feature this author because this is what he did. We have people telling us about, all those greats in sci-fi, fantasy, horror, and they name specific names, and they go, this is what he did to me. I don't want to talk about it publicly, but this is what he did to me. This is what he did to other women. And, I thought y'all should know because we've been doing this program, right? Read for Pixels for the last decade. So the Whisper Network is alive and well, but I wish that a Whisper Network is really useful for women and girls, but I wish, we will get to a point where we can all talk about it openly, right? And say, well, Linda, were you going to say something?
I was just going to support everything that everyone said, including Paul and yourself. And that is that it's all one process, right? There's no direct line. There are people who are stepping out of that background whisper and standing up and saying, this is not acceptable. There are women who are saying that. And then, as Angela says, that brings more women up. As Paula says, that brings more men up being, I didn't know how bad it was. I'm going to support this. I have daughters and stuff out there. So it's a process, though. I don't think there's just like a step 1 to 10 with it. So I just wanted to add that in there, that I feel like it's multi-layered. Yeah.
Everyone does it in their own time. Everyone does it uses an approach that's comfortable for them. And it's because it's already really uncomfortable, right? To say, I need to say something about this male author who is really famous and who is really powerful and has a lot of influence, and I'm just up and coming, and nobody really listens to women or whatever it is, and to actually step up and even click send on that email to us, to say, hey, if you're ever thinking about it, don't invite this author because this is what he did to me. Or sometimes we get, this is what he did to my friend, and she's given me permission to, because she can't bring herself to send a message to y'all. So I'm doing it, and because she needs you to know. So the Whisper Network is really good. It's just that, hopefully eventually we'll get to a point where, in horror and other parts of the writing community, where we can actually be a lot more open with that, because it will help stop predators, I think, once they're outed, because everyone will know it's them, right? So once they're outed, but we respect everyone's confidentiality until people are ready to step forward with it. Anyway, so related to that, okay, so do you think the Me Too movement has helped how women and girls are portrayed in horror and horror-adjacent stories, and that these portrayals are progressing towards a more positive direction over the past decade? Linda?
Well, I thought about this question. I'm not sure how directly it is part of that, because I think it's, again, as I said, everything's kind of a grade way that we're all evolving here. It's not all black and white. So I don't know that it's so direct. I mean, I think it's part of the whole landscape of all creators being more aware that they are creating characters who are not victimized, that they can't just use a character because they're female any way they want. And so in that way, but I don't know how direct it is to that one lane to making changes. I'm not sure what the percentage is.
Yeah. Angela, what do you think?
I'm going to say what I would like to think. I don't know factually, but I would like to just do a resounding, screaming yes. That's what I would like to think, and I'm one of those optimists that, despite being a horror writer, that will always be like, no, it's fine. The guy with the mask, he's okay. It's like it's fine. It's just a little death, but maybe not. I do feel like it's just inappropriate now. Like there's just so much more attention to it that yes, I believe it's changing, but I don't have any facts. I mean, I'd like to say yeah, it's gone, but
But there are a lot more. I noticed that there are a lot more Me Too themed stories now, at least in horror and in dark fantasy, and people referring to it at least.
Well, and the fact that it's okay to have those stories, because at one time those kind of stories were kind of more like what's like fussy stories or problem stories or snowflake stories. They would kind of be like, oh, this type of story, that writer is just trying to like stand on a soapbox and air their grievances. And now we don't say that. You know what I mean? Like it's okay to tell these personal stories, and it's okay to tell, this type of fiction. I think has made a big difference.
Yeah. Paul, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I like Angela and Linda, I have no idea. I try to be hopeful, but I have no idea like how much it's helped. But I mean, I think given the seismic event that was Me Too and within the cultures across the world, it would be impossible for it to not have some impact on writing, given that horror writing or any writing, you're interacting with the culture, and just the fact that Me Too has become shorthand and everyone knows what that's referring to, I think is a hopeful thing or a sign of change.
Yeah. And I think it's also a sign of change that when we release the charity anthology, which is I guess essentially Me Too stories, we got comments from readers going, "This is great! It's really cathartic." And I think I told you this story, right? That someone left an Amazon review that said, "This is great. Now I no longer have to think of how I'm gonna go off my abusive brother-in-law because this is so cathartic. It helps me imagine justice. And I don't need to do that in real life and go to jail for it. But, it helped her feel a lot better about where things are going."
So can always depend on a horror writer to off anybody you need off. Fictionally, though. Fictionally.
Linda is going like, yeah, we can kill people fictionally. Bad people fictionally. So on a related note, do y'all think that the violent alpha male type that is common in horror has started phasing out of the genre over the past decade? Or do you think it's one of those stereotypes that are going to stick around much longer than expected? You know what? We'll break the rule a little bit and we'll start with Paul.
Dang it, I was too slow with my mute button. That's a really interesting question. I can say, I think this is sort of horror adjacent, but within the last 4 years, there's been some really high profile books that feature serial killer characters, but it's not from their point of view. And a most recent one is a really wonderful first novel by Clemence Michalin called The Quiet Tenant. So there is a serial killer who kills women, but you're never inside his character. The story is told from the point of view of 3 women: his daughter, his captive, and another woman who he's trying to sort of start dating, etc. So this is a book that really engages with this notion that you described with the sort of the alpha male trope of the serial killer story that we've seen so many times, in a really, I think, sort of interesting, progressive way. I think that ultimately, honors, there are characters who get killed, but it's mostly off screen, but it honors their experience, if that makes sense, or it honors, I want to say honors the violence. I should say it brings dignity to the violence. The idea that those that experience a violent act, and certainly those that witness this, are changed forever, whether or not they survive it. So, that kind of, it's really more like, I guess, a survivor story in the guise of a serial killer novel. So I'm sorry, that's a really long answer to say that was the first thing I thought of when you mentioned the alpha male, that there's been multiple high profile novels, taking that sort of power away from like the male serial killer alpha male that have done very well.
Mm-hmm. Linda, what do you think?
Oh, I totally agree with what Paul said. I mean, I'm glad he was able to quote one, because I was like, I got these books around me and I'm trying to think of how to quote it. But the books I have are writers who wouldn't do that anyway. So, the changeover and is different. I think that for sure that has become like, what you're going to get is, oh, that's just a one-dimensional character, to make it that way. And I also kind of enjoy the alpha female ones that are coming up. You know what I'm saying? I am not opposed to a woman going off and being like stronger and faster and smarter than the rest. That's all good too. So I think that balances out what used to be accepted as the alpha male, is that, yes, that same energy can be female, and, to do more than just say that. So I think that is becoming less. It's not gone, but it's a lot less, I believe.
What's really annoying, I'm just going to make an observation here, is that whenever we have an alpha female character, as you call it, the male geeks will start going, "That's a Mary Sue," and I'm like, oh.
I have no time for that conversation. It doesn't exist in my universe. So just saying. Nobody says that to me, because I will respond in a way that will not support that.
So, Angela, what do you think? You're grinning right there.
Well, I'm laughing at Linda, because I'm just picturing somebody who might say that they're going to get their universe redone a little bit. It's funny that you say that, because I just finished a book by Jeff Strand, Bad Day for Voodoo, and I loved the male character in that, because they're just both equal. You know what I mean? There's no like, I'm the male character, and so he's actually quite a goof, and it's Jeff Strand, so there's a lot of comedy in this. And he's bumbling along, and his girlfriend is actually the one that he actually refers to as like, but then she has such a calm head, and she, took the glass out of my leg, and so I'm really glad that she was there. But then I did this thing and fell in the hole with the zombie, and like, in retrospect, when she said that was a bad idea, it really was too bad I did it anyway, so I like that it wasn't the portrayal of, the alpha male, and I'm coming in and I'm going to tell my girlfriend I'm keeping her safe in the back seat, so it was really fun story. But I do feel like that is changing. I keep seeing, I can't think of any other stories like that, but where the alpha male character either isn't the alpha male, they're just a male going along doing we're all goofy. Like, we're all always making mistakes, and, put me in that situation, I guarantee I'm going to fall in the hole with the zombie or something. But also, we're seeing that alpha male character as the victim more. Like, in some of these stories I've read, it's almost like the stupidity of that mindset is the danger to that character. So it like flips on them, that is the downfall. Like, maybe, and I cannot think of a clear example, but, I'll protect you. I'm the alpha male, do all this stuff. And then that's the first person that's going to get their head chopped off, so that I kind of feel like it's still there, but we're not, I don't know, awed by it anymore. It's now more of a comedic thing, or, that's kind of where I'm seeing it. It's still there, but it's funny. I mean, go ahead and run in the front and save us all, Yeah, you go first.
You go. Yeah, in the movies, though, I mean, another observation, like when we think of iconic horror characters, usually when you think of it, it's usually male, like Freddy or Jason and all. But I noticed recently, like, we are having reboots or reimaginings of horror movie franchises. Like the latest Predator movie, the lead character is a native woman and her dog. Oh, and Aliens, yes. Oh, Aliens. Oh, cool.
Yeah,
Linda.
the main point of this book, it was written by V. Castro, who I love everything that she writes, is Vasquez, who was in the the beginning alien thing, and she's like the hero here. She was pretty tough then too, so I kind of like that too. But
Aliens is one of the Alien franchise is one of the few classic horror movie franchises that has a female hero, right? Alpha female hero. What's her name? Ellen Ripley. And Ripley set the standard. But what's weird is that, I've thought about it, is that what's weird about it is that there was this entire gap between Ellen Ripley and sort of like a space of maybe a decade or so before we saw another alpha female character that's iconic. I think that was in the Terminator, but that's science fiction. That's not horror, right? Is that classified as horror or dystopia or?
Yeah, I mean, maybe crossover, a little of both.
Yeah, but it's kind of sad because we had Ripley in was that the 70s when the first Alien movie came out?
First Alien, I believe, was 79. I think Aliens was 86. Within those years, yeah.
And then when we had Terminator 2, just when the brain's not working right now. What's her name? Linda
Hamilton.
Yeah, Linda Hamilton's character. That was in the 1990s, right? So there's like more than a decade between both of them.
Yeah. What about Silence of the Lambs, though? Because I think of Clarice. Isn't that pretty recent? I think of Clarice as not the same energy of like the alpha male, but she's definitely the strong female character in that.
Yeah,
right?
Her strength was her intelligence,
Mm-hmm.
her ability to analyze the situation, which certainly.
Yeah. So okay, so just a couple of things on the audience. One is response to Linda. I love the character Vasquez. She was the other tough woman besides Ripley. I always wish the two of them could have fought the alien together. Linda's going, yeah. And there's a question from the audience as well. So Misty306, hi Misty. Misty's one of our regular viewers, and she's also a librarian. So she has a question. So more women are writing horror, which is why we're seeing a shift in how women are portrayed in these narratives. Can the same be said about BIPOC characters in horror as well, like i.e. Jordan Peele? So let's start with Linda.
Yeah, I mean, Jordan Peele is doing the visual side of things, right, with his movies, and certainly the women in his movies are strong, intelligent characters. But there's a lot of, I mean, just not for nothing, but the last StokerCon in Pittsburgh this year, there were 6 works on the final ballot by Black women. That had never happened. I mean, that was like historic. Sadly, so many things are when you start going down that kind of cut. So, yeah, that is happening. And again, not that non-BIPOC people aren't writing BIPOC characters, but there are a lot of writing being done by that culture or group of people. And so as a side effect of that is you are seeing more of those kinds of characters in anthologies and stories, in whole books that are coming out that are circled around Black writers writing horror. When I first did Sycorax's Daughters, that was like a blowout. Like, oh my God, they didn't know there were that many Black women writing horror. And I really needed that because it was pretty lonely in the room I sat for many years. So I was like, let me get some more people in here. So it's the same effect as what we talked about earlier. Because more Black writers are writing horror, you are seeing more well-rounded, not stereotyped Black characters in horror writing also.
Angela, what about you? What do you think?
I think absolutely, definitely. For me, it started with Black Cranes, and it was, I think, 12 of us Asian women got together with Genevieve Flynn and Lee Murray. And then we were so excited to have these stories out there and to be able to tell Asian horror stories, even though they're not Asian as in like, the guy walking along in his hat, on by the side of the river, and then the nine-tailed fox comes out. Like, it was actual, modern retellings and our own stories. And we just didn't want to shut up because we were so excited that we had this out there and that the reception was so amazing. So then we did another one. And yeah, and then Unquiet Spirits just came out the beginning of this year, I think, right? Like February. Yeah, and so we did that one, and we keep going. Yeah, we're not going to do this anymore. We're done. We said all that we wanted to say. But after 3 books, we might think of something else to say. So I think absolutely. And I'm seeing in the calls, yeah, Sumiko just did that, didn't she? Isn't that Sumiko's book? Yeah. So it is like, I think that we're all just feeling like we can say these things. And more than that, realizing that there is interest. Because I think growing up when we were younger, characters were all pretty much the same, and they were pretty white, and they were a lot of times male in the alpha male way. It was a very bland kind of environment for storytelling. And now really anything goes. But I think that's freeing for everybody. Like, we want more stories, we want more variety, we want more global variety. And so I'm going to say yes. My opinion, yes. Hell yes.
And just wanted to point out that Asia has a very long history of horror folklore. I mean, look at the Japanese horror movies and the Thai horror movies and all the horrific stuff in our folklore. It's scary stuff. Teachers and parents use that to scare their kids into submission. Like, don't do that.
We grow up with ghosts and monsters, right, Regina? Like, that's real life. That's grandma.
I mean, think of James Wan. We all think of James Wan as, the creators of the most iconic horror franchises right now, right? The Conjuring universe, for example. And James Wan was born in Malaysia, and he's Chinese Malaysian. His parents moved to Australia when he was a kid. But you can see the influences in the beats of the movies that he directs. And I'm sitting there, when I first watched The Conjuring, and I'm like, oh my God, this is Southeast Asian. It might be set in the US, but those hands coming out of the wardrobe, yeah, Southeast Asian all the way. Okay, so I'm going to stop vexing Yuriko and let Paul speak. Oh, wait, Linda, what were you going to say?
Real quick, I was just wanted to add that I love other cultures, and there's literally no culture I've found that doesn't have deep roots in some kind of horror folklore.
Mm-hmm. So, Paul, any thoughts?
Oh, well, I mean, one, like, Asian horror movies are by far the scariest. I mean, are in some of my favorites. I enjoy them so much. This is a little bit of an aside, but it's partly because they don't hew to the 3-act structure that Hollywood like enforces on everybody. It's like, no, like, these movies actually have 5 acts, or who knows how many acts. I don't even know what an act is, frankly, but I hate the idea of everything being forced in 3 acts. I would just add, again, things need to be way better, but like evidence of things improving. I mean, short of Stephen King and Joe Hill, like there's been maybe in the last 2 years since 2020, 3 horror writers on the New York Times bestsellers list, and 2 of them were BIPOC. Sylvia Moreno Garcia and Stephen Graham Jones, right? Yeah. And the last thing, it's specific to the person who asked the question. She said she was a librarian, right? She mentioned Jordan Peele. Keep an eye out. I think it's coming out in like a month. He actually edited an anthology called Out There Screaming, and I was very lucky to get an arc for it. And I'm about 3/4 of the way through, and it's great. It's absolutely great.
Yeah, and I was gonna point out, that African folklore also has some really, really scary monsters. There's a movie, I can't remember what the name is. It's a South African movie, and it's about a woman who becomes a janitor at an asylum or something in South Africa, in Johannesburg, I think. But anyway, something has happened to a little girl in the asylum. And they find out what, and it's so scary. It's on Tubi. I can't remember what the name is, but apparently it was based on folklore from that region. And I thought, that is hella scary. And I think it's about time that, English language horror got this infusion of what's out there. And Linda, I think you can tell us that, Black culture spanning African folklore, Black culture in the US, and the Caribbean, they have a real treasure trove of horror figures and horror tropes and all that. And I can't wait to see more come out. And I'm pretty sure that there are plenty from Latin America as well. Yeah. So let's move on to talking about the future. We've been talking about the past and the present, so let's talk about the future. So one of the ways in which horror authors can help with changing the patriarchal culture that normalizes violence against women now and in the years to come is, as horror master Joe Hill put it during our first ever Read for Pixels live stream session a decade ago. He said, tell the right stories. You gotta tell the right stories. You can't just tell whatever stories. You got to tell the right ones. So let's get down to the nuts and bolts of storytelling for horror authors who like to tackle violence against women as a theme in their stories instead of just relying on tropes. So what are some of the techniques that horror authors can use to turn toxic tropes that are rife with sexism, misogyny, and or violence against women on their heads, and even use them to send the message to the reader that violence against women is never acceptable? Let's start with Angela this time.
When something has happened to you and you have that moment where you're like, I should have said, or I should have done. I feel like us writing that, the should have happened, because I think we've all been victimized at some point. Like everybody is at one point a victim to some degree. And you have that moment of, this is what I should have done. That's what I feel like we should be writing in these stories, not creating more victims, but showing what could the victim have done to change that story, not in a shaming way or a teaching way of like, oh, well, you should have done, don't wear that short skirt or that wouldn't happen to you, Missy. Not that kind of should have done, but like empowering our characters so that they are not victims and they don't have to be victims. In my life, I don't feel like a victim ever. But that has happened to me. And so that's kind of like what I try to put in these stories, is not letting the victim be victimized. So that's what I would say.
Yeah. Just a short aside, I want to read something from by Stephen Graham Jones, who's not with us today, from the anthology. His comment at the end of his story, he left a note here, the note from the author. He said, when I was 17, a friend showed up one day with a black eye. She was 17 too, and the guy she was dating was 22. I asked her what happened, and she said, he just gets mad sometimes. It's nothing. I didn't need to worry about her. I lost track of this friend after high school, but I never lost track of her excusing that guy. She's always in my head saying that. So in some of my stories, I give her a pan or a machete and I have the story turn out in a different way. So that's how Stephen uses the story, the same what you were talking about. So Linda, what are your thoughts about this issue?
Well, I think that one of the things that I talk about when I'm on panels or talking to other authors about this is, and it's also reflected, I think, in guidelines that are being sent out now as far as writing news stories and new books, is to understand what the psychology is of the victimizer and the victim. As far as whether there's monsters, aliens, the creature from the Black Lagoon, something. What is the meaning behind it? And good writing will develop an answer to that. I'm going to throw Paul on top of the bus because I've always loved his writing because of that no matter what the characters are going through in his writing, there is levels of meaning for why it's happening, and levels of meanings that bring you into the character, and they're human now. They're not just a stereotypical weak this or a strong that. There's points to it. So I think that for writers now, you really have to question your own reasoning for why you have this in there. Why is that person that way? Is it necessary? This is good writing questions, by the way. This has nothing to do with anything. Like, is there a reason for it? And I'm going to throw this book up more than once because I believe in it. It's been around a long time. Writing the Other by Nisi Shaw and Cynthia Ward. Because in here they have exercises, things to question yourself, so that you don't fall down the line of just doing the stereotypical, what you've read, what you've heard, what you believe kind of thing. You actually get in there and question, what is the purpose of what you're doing, and do something different.
Paul, what do you think?
Wow, what an amazing answer. I mean, I don't think I could add anything to the greatness of that answer. And you're very kind, Linda. I appreciate it. You know, and as Linda like pointed out very clearly and smartly, that, you know, that applies to all writing. And I think with horror and how it can get into trouble is because horror does rely on some sort of transgression, right? Like, so when it goes bad, it's very sort of like memorably bad. It's like icky. It's, you know, or, you know, because it sticks with you when you know it goes bad. It's like, oh, that's really upsetting, you know. And that's sort of the hard part of horror, is it's by design. It's supposed to disturb and upset, but who are you disturbing and upsetting, and why are you doing that? Is, you know, something, you know, I think about a lot. And I'm going to quote someone else really smarter than me, and who's my all respect to everybody here, but my favorite current horror writer working, Mariana Enriquez. If you've never read her, she's amazing. She was interviewed in the New York Times when her book Our Share of Night came out. You know, she's Argentinian, and her giant novel takes place during like the Argentinian Dirty War. And so anyway, I'll just read this little quote about it, because it, you know, it talks about like violence and what do you think about it and how it can be used. So anyway, it says, while Enriquez revels in horror conventions, her writing also urges readers to remember that it's the real life monstrosities that should truly frighten. Violence in Latin America has been normalized to the point that people's reaction to it has become subdued. And now that's quoting Mariana, putting in the horror, including the jump scares, including the gore, including the parts that have to do with thoughts about evil. It's like returning those things to the realm of the horrible rather than the quotidian to which we grow accustomed. And to me, that's sort of like what my favorite horror stories sort of do, is the recontextualizing of our daily horror into something, you know, that you can confront in some way, I guess.
Yeah. And when we recontextualize things, it also, and when we don't make the women the victims in a horror movie or book or story women, and when we look at things in a multi-dimensional way from all the different angles, that also helps cut down. I might be wrong, but doesn't that also automatically in some ways help cut down on reducing victims of rape and sexual assault and domestic violence to the sum of their abuse? Am I correct?
I think so, in different ways too, right? Because if you're putting a multi-leveled thing out there of why this is happening, it's not a simple answer anymore. You don't get to slap a woman just because, you know, you're having a bad day anymore. You know, you see, if you're being exposed to this levels of work. Thank you, Paul, because I see you out there putting it out there, baby, and that's all good. Not just you, but you know what I'm saying. You know I love your work. So what you're doing is, even if you're not consciously reprogramming, you are subconsciously reprogramming. Just like seeing women and so forth putting horror out all of a sudden. I mean, what Peele did with the movie Get Out, come on now. Like in the Black community, we watch those movies with the ghosts and we're all like, we're getting out of there. We're get out. I mean, that's what we hear. So he did with that movie, what he did with it in a humor and using like the approach, made it one of the most successful movies. And if you read about people psychologically breaking down what that movie represents for Black, white, and all this kind of stuff, it's pretty deep.
What do you think? Sorry. Oh, okay. So what do you think, Angela? You're still muted, Angela.
Sorry. I've gotten lost into what that question even was, because I am now off in
I was just making an observation about, you know, how what you, Linda, and Paul was saying about, you know, turning toxic stereotypes on your heads, and the methods that all of y'all prescribed also contribute to, you know, subconsciously or not, they contribute. If authors do that, then they would not reduce female characters to the sum of their trauma.
Absolutely. That's actually why I started writing fiction a long time ago, because I wanted a female character that wasn't victimized, that would strike back at her. It's not a revenge story like Giving the Devil His Due tends to be, but it's just she doesn't cower in fear. I was so tired of the females always like, oh, I'm so, you know, I'm terrified. I have to run. I have to do this. And so that's why I started writing fiction, because I felt like that, the fictionalized story, it's one thing to tell it in the newspaper, which is where I came from. But when you tell it in fiction, people believe it. We don't believe anything in the newspaper, but we believe it when it's a made up story, because it's able to tap into a deeper truth. It's not bound by fact and everything. It can cut through all the quotes and the who said what and all those boring details, but get down to the core of the problem and the core of the message. And that's how we change as a culture. The things that were written about 100 years ago are not appropriate today. What we're writing about now will probably not be appropriate 100 years from now. I hope we've evolved into better fiction. Well, please, like, still have horror around though. Like, let's not evolve that much. We still need, you know, some horror. But yeah, I think that fiction and story and all that is very important for that, to change that mindset.
Though lately the headlines are just, real life is just weirder than fiction lately with the news headlines. So yeah. So, you know, on that note, can y'all share tips and suggestions for horror writers who wish to work towards not including violence against women gratuitously in their future work, but are unsure of how to proceed if they have been used to relying on violence against women as a convenient shorthand? So they're already using it and they want to do better. So what would your piece of advice to them would be, Linda?
Well, I'm going to go back to this again, writing the other, which makes you question why you're doing certain things. There may be reasons for it, but you have to understand and question yourself. You have to be willing to look in the mirror and go, maybe this is not a good idea. And there's exercises in here to work you through all that stuff. That's going to be my first thing to go with.
Okay. Paul?
Yeah, I mean, that's amazing advice. I mean, I guess I would go back to the idea of, like, you know, whenever there's violence, I mean, and listen, I can't be a hypocrite, because I can say, like, Evil Dead 2 is like one of my favorite movies where the violence is just goofy, right? But like, if you're writing a horror story, you know, to me, that's more like, you know, horror comedy. But, you know, the idea of, like, the dignify the violence. And what I mean by that is not normalize it, but you're going to dignify the experience of the people. You know, these are actually people. Like, these are real people who are suffering. You need to honor that in some way.
Mm-hmm. Angela?
I'm going to add to that all these excellent pieces of advice, that don't feel pressured to go beyond what you're comfortable with or what you feel like you want to include. The story that I'm getting ready to publish next year has a rape. It's about Okinawa and the things that happened to Okinawan girls during the war. Rape was a huge part of that. I don't want to put that in the book. So it doesn't dance around it in the way of, like, oh, we're just not going to go there. It addresses it. But I don't have to put that graphicness in there. I don't have to bring that back to somebody maybe who endured that. And I feel like that, for me, in my place, was not the right thing to write. So, and somebody did tell me, I had a first reader say, it's going to be much more believable if you actually have the character go through it so we can see it. You know what? Go write a different book then, because I don't feel like I need to put that in there, and I don't want to. I feel like that, for me, that's as me, would glorify it somehow. So don't feel pressured, even if people tell you that. We're horror writers. We're supposed to be horrible, but we choose how we want to be horrible.
I'm gonna step in here from a perspective as someone who has been working in the anti-violence against women movement for the last almost 15 years, and who loves pop culture, who reads a lot of horror, who watches a lot of horror. Don't do it. Seriously, like, please show the consequences. That's more horrifying, in my view. If you show what happens afterwards to that person and the community around them and how it ripples out through history, if you write that sort of book. But it's kind of a cheap shot, right? If you do a blow by blow scene thing. I don't know what y'all, I mean, I know what Angela thinks of that, but I don't know what Linda and Paul think about what I'm observing here. But if you do like a one blow and blow domestic violence or rape scene, like, I've seen enough of that in my work. I don't need to read about that or watch that in my downtime, right? But a lot of people still like that sort of thing. And that's how we get Game of Thrones, right? So I don't know what both of you think. I mean, Linda, what do you think?
Well, what came to my mind is this is the rise of trigger warnings, okay? Because trigger warnings are a way to say to someone, this is going to involve this kind of thing. I would say almost all my horror has been psychological, but I did just finish a story that writing it disturbed me so deeply and went into the deepest, hardest part of pain in my childhood. And I chose to do it. And it was a hard journey to go through. And there's details in there that they're not direct to what I went through, but they are there for many reasons. And it was just, it's in the 50 years I've been writing, the hardest story I've ever written. And there is some details in there that I would not have ever put in. But for some reason, I went through that journey with this story. Now, one person who read it, who never reads that kind of stuff, was like, no, Linda, this was not, like gore or detailed violence for no reason. This person never reads that kind of stuff, and they felt deeply touched by what I did. So I guess that's something. So I think really you just have to go by your own sensibilities, go by what you want to write. And this is, again, why I think trigger warnings have come into play, so that's my feeling on it.
Yeah, it's have you all ever read stuff and then suddenly got hit by a horrible scene and you thought, I wish they gave me a trigger warning because this is just putting me off the rest of the story or the rest of the book?
I don't need them personally, but I understand why they exist. And the publisher of the anthology, the story is going to be, and it was like, I don't think this needs a trigger warning. So obviously it's not as harsh as I thought. I'm just not used to writing it that way. Paul, I should send it to you.
Yeah. Paul, what do you think?
Sending it to Angela. I already know she ain't going to want me to.
Yeah. I mean, just like as a writer, like I have been, so lucky that, I've not experienced sexual violence nor domestic violence. So my own personal line is I'm not going to include that in my stories. However, but I'm saying, but if this writer, particularly if it's a woman who has experienced these things and wants to write about them, then I think, they should, obviously, because they're coming from a place of experience, from a place that for them they feel is important to explore. Yeah, I mean, that's going to be a hard read, but I mean, I think there are some horror readers who some read for that catharsis, and I think there are plenty of horror readers, and I kind of feel like I'm one of them, the horror reader that likes having the horrible truth revealed, because I do find like a weird hope in that. Like, as terrible as some things can be, I just find a little bit of hope. Is like, oh, this person knows this is terribly wrong. That's sort of where, for my own, privileged set of experiences, I know that's horror's appeal for me, is that sort of shared communication. So, yeah, I don't know. How's that for a rambly answer?
Okay, so we've come to the final questions of this evening's session. So let's talk about tips and recommendations for the horror community. And aside from writers, that includes readers, editors, and publishers with regards to tackling sexism, misogyny, and violence against women. Do you have any tips and suggestions for publishers and editors who wish to join efforts to address sexism, misogyny, and violence against women in the horror space? Angela.
You mean like recommending books specifically?
No, recommending what publishers and editors could do if they in the horror space if they wanted to. Yeah.
I think basically everything that we've said on this panel, stay true to the story. Don't include things because you think they'll sell. Include them because the story needs that thing to be included. Yeah, and just make sure you're writing authentic. You make sure you're publishing authentic stories, and that we're not just having the blonde and the white T-shirt run through our story because it's a convenient way to move the plot. You know, put mindfulness into it.
Yeah, Linda, what do you think?
I couldn't agree more. I've been in a lot of anthologies, like 90 in my life, and I've noticed in the last 10 years in particular, 5 years in particular, that anthology guidelines are saying, and I did a sample of it in my notes here, they're saying stories and poems should tend away from explicit core, sex, and profanity. They also include violence, except, like Angela said, were absolutely essential. Again, this is good writing. You know, I mean, I'm not a thrill writer, you know, so I don't know what that means, but but I mean, I think that's what we're talking about. The difference between a good writer, where if it's in there, it has an essential meaning to the story, the plot, the character's growth, and when it's just thrown in, like, you know, as a cheap thrill.
Paul?
Yeah, I mean, that's the hard part, but that's the core of it. I mean, the hard part being is every editor, every writer has to ask, and I ask this of everything that I write, like, why is this here? You know, I might have the wrong answer, but like by the time I finish a story or a novel, like I can explain to myself, this is why this is here. You know, whether it's a sentence, a word, or, you know, or something violent that happens in the story. So, you know, you're not going to get everything right, but, you know, when you don't, like, listen and don't take it personally. Like, I mean, I guess that would be the biggest piece of advice. It was funny. So the last thing I would add, because it brought to mind another great book by a woman's debut novel this year, you know, mentioned like the no sex score unless it's absolutely necessary. CJ Lead has a novel called Mayfly, and it's definitely sort of the alpha female sort of version of American Psycho, where her character is, I mean, it is some of the most disturbing horror I've ever read, but it's amazing. It's really beautifully written, and it is really gory, and there are parts that like made me squirm like I've never squirmed before. And also, but it feels like weirdly celebratory in some way. So, I mean, CJ is definitely, you know, that book is already amazing. She's definitely someone to watch who's, you know, we were talking about all the toxic tropes that she's totally twisting those around, but still using some of the same devices. I mean, there's that, you know, she's definitely doing some extreme gore and extreme violence, but it's coming from a different place and directed in a different area as well.
So you were really squirming in your seat while you were reading that?
Oh yeah, there was a couple of scenes that were like, well, I'm kind of a wimp when it comes to gore though. So, but yes, full.
Okay, I guess I'm not sending my story to you either, Paul.
Oh no, send it to me, Linda. You know I love gore. I just didn't want to go through that scene.
No, I got you. That's what I said.
I know, send me all the blood. I need it.
So last but not least, and we touched a little bit on this in the beginning, do y'all think there have been any changes, or indeed any change at all, in the attitudes of the people in the community, horror community, including authors, publishers, readers, and fandoms over the past decade with regards to misogyny, sexism, and violence against women? Linda?
Definitely there has been improvements. Definitely there has been change. Where we're not seeing a lot of the changes in the old guard that are still sitting around like wanting things to be the way they are. Sorry, that's not how life works. So I think it's definitely moving in the right direction. And we have a lot of allies, people who don't have to, but are evolved enough to realize that this is just not a good story and it's just not right.
And Angela?
I agree with that. I think readers are voting by buying these books. The books that are coming out now, like Giving the Devil His Due, Sycorax's Daughters, Tortured Willows, like these are books that I don't, maybe I'm wrong, I don't feel like that they could have made it 10 years ago, but they are now. And there's more and more of them. The Scapegracers is about a lesbian teenage witch reject person and all the things. And it was a beautiful, brilliant story. The Fault in Our Stars. I mean, there's just so much of these stories that are kind of crossing out of all the typical in the genre, and people are loving them. And I feel like these stories are being accepted. That's the change. Makes us want to write more.
Paul, what do you think?
Yeah,
Has the
I mean, so
community changed?
yeah, so well said. I mean, of course, I mean, there's the vocal minority. The hopeful side of me feels like hopefully those are the dying sort of whales of dinosaurs, right? But listen, I mean, the truth of it, like to anyone who's lived on Earth for more than 10, that has reached adulthood, there is no, you can't restore any status quo. Like life and existence is change. I mean, that's just the truth of it. You can't, like writing a story that restores something is just false. Like, or writing a story that harkens to good old days, that's a lie. There's no such thing as the good old days. And horror at its best reflects that existence in life is change. It's also the awe and horror of change. So, I'm hopeful that the genre, which for a long time has had the reputation of being very reactionary, I'm really excited in seeing so many talented writers, including the women in this room, are helping to change that.
Yeah, and I think in some ways that maybe what's happening in the English language horror community, because I think horror is written in so many different languages, right, in different cultures, and people are evolving. And I might be wrong, but I think that the best horror still has its roots in where all that came from, and it's all very basic down to our most primal fears. But it changes with time because the way people react and respond to all these fears and all these issues changes, right? So that's the best in horror. I mean, in my opinion, at least. Not sure what y'all think, but that's my opinion about horror. The best in tradition, but it's made modern by the way people treat those issues that scare them, that frighten them, that they fear. Because if you tell a kid now about something that your parents used to as a boogeyman for you, I don't think they're afraid of it now. It doesn't work anymore, I don't think. So the things that people get scared of also change over time, right? Sometimes, not all of it, but some of it. So modern horror is really good at that. Okay, so we've come to the end of our session. And thank you so much to three of you for being with us today. And I'm going to share a little screen thing now to show everyone where to go get goodies, because Paul's goodies are gone. Paul's goodies I'm going to tell y'all, I posted Paul's goodies and went to bed, and the next morning, where are Paul's goodies? Paul's goodies are gone. So let's talk about, so today we talked a lot about writing. So let's see if I can get this. Oh, here we go. Ta-da, everyone. Okay, so let's talk about we're having a fundraiser, and we're attempting to raise $10,000. Normally, we just raise $5,000, but this time it's our 10th anniversary, and we're attempting $10,000. And all the authors who have participated, there are more than 50 authors, almost 50 or more than 50 authors, somewhere around there, approximately 50 authors who've donated a huge heap of goodies. And so let's talk about Angela and Linda's goodies. So Angela, we were talking about writing and tips for writers. So Angela has goodies for writers. So if you're a speculative fiction author, if you write horror, obviously, science fiction and or fantasy, and if you live anywhere in the world and you're looking for more opportunities to get your name out there, Angela is offering 2 different types of goodies. So the first one is the Exercise Your Rights bundle, and includes 1 pre-recorded appearance on her Exercise Your Rights online talking show, one written interview with links to supplement your appearance that will either appear on Angela's website if you are an author who is writing outside of the speculative fiction genre, or it might, Angela, am I correct? It might appear in Space and Time magazine if you write speculative fiction. And there's also one audio-only podcast edition to help you reach a different audience. And just to let you know, Angela is also throwing in a bonus. You get one full-page black and white ad in the Space and Time magazine. So if you're a horror author, science fiction author, or fantasy author, you might want to think about this package. And Angela's Exercise of Rights online talk show is where authors can talk about their journey to success as an author so far. And it's usually booked up months in advance. So Angela is actually reserving 2 slots here for donors, and you would join horror luminaries such as Lee Murray, Alma Katsu, Colleen Anderson, Ai Jiang, of course, Linda Addison. They've all been guests on Angela's show. And if it's not for you, you can also donate to get this, to gift this opportunity to someone else you know if you wish. And the second one is Author Opportunities for authors, and that's Angela's subscription, which is a weekly calendar mail out where subscribers get sent a full month of open submission calls, grants, etc., straight to their inbox. And here's the treat. So usually it's $50 to join the subscription, I think, Angela, but you're offering it to donors for $35. So make a $35 donation to us, and you get a whole year of this subscription. And so let's move on to Angela's goodies. And Angela is offering a really exclusive books and swag bundle to one horror aficionado residing in the US. And it comprises one copy of Giving the Devil His Due, the Pixel Project's charity anthology. This is due to go off the shelves after October 31st this year, and this is the special edition which has already gone off the shelves. Right now you can only buy the classic edition, but the special edition is what Linda has, and Linda will also tuck in a handwritten and signed original poem from her to you. And Linda's also including a set of signed and personalized books that she has edited or has a story in. These are all anthologies, so it's a mix of fiction, nonfiction, and poetry for your reading pleasure, including, I'm going to read out a couple of them. A Haunted History of Invisible Women, which is edited by Leanna Renee Heber and Andrea Janes, Elizabeth Carey Mahan, with an afterword by Linda. Called Sticks and Stones, and also A Woman Unbecoming is an anthology edited by Rachel A. Brune and Carol Geisender, with Failed Love Lessons, a poem by Linda. And Linda also has a whole bunch of really awesome swag that she's going to tuck in along with the poem and the books. And yeah, and so let's talk about where to go get them. So as you can see on the slide, you can donate to make your donations to get the goodies via our Rally Out fundraising page. Go to tinyurl.com/R4P Rally Out 2023. This is case sensitive, so please make sure you take it down accurately. And Anusha is putting that link in the chat box on YouTube as well, so you can click to go there directly. You can also find out more about the Read for Pixels program if you go to bit.ly/readforpixels, where you can find out more about the authors that we've worked with over the years, the activities that we've done under this program over the years. It's been 10 years. We have a lot. I think we have about 300 recorded live stream interviews and panel sessions with authors. Whoever you're thinking about right now, we probably have a session with them. So go check it out. You can go to our YouTube page as well. Just type in the Pixel Project, go there, and you can see a whole bunch of author interviews. And speaking of the devils, okay, so Giving the Devil His Due, as I mentioned, it's only available through to the end of October 31st. So it's available now on Amazon, Kobo, Google Play, Barnes & Noble, and all other major booksellers worldwide. And you can find out more about it if you go to bit.ly/Giving the Devil His Due. Again, it's case sensitive. And if you prefer not to read an ebook or paperback, we have an audiobook that's been recorded by some of the biggest names in the audiobook industry, because storytellers and narrators. And it's available now from Audible, Apple, Google Play, Spotify, Kobo, Chirp, and all other major audiobook retailers worldwide. If you want more information about our audiobook narrators and who produced this and what the audiobook is about, go to tinyurl.com, GTDHT audiobook, R for P again, is case sensitive. So I'm going to take this off screen. So finally, before we leave this, all of us leave the stage, do any of you have any announcements, authors? Who wants to go first? I know all of you have something. Angela, let's go alphabetically. Angela, do you have any announcements?
Yes, I'll just say Misogyny, my first novel, is coming out early next year. It's ready now, but I'm waiting for Appy Month in May. I thought that was more appropriate. And the next Space and Time magazine comes out at the end of October.
Okay, so. Linda?
Yeah, up for pre-order is Joe Lansdale, the Drive-In Multiplex, where I have a crazy poem in here. It's a shape poem. It's a mess. It's Joe Lansdale. What can I tell you? He's one of my mentors. So also, I have an amazing poem in the Book of Witches. Talk about a publisher doing something different. Look at that. That poem is called The Seed of Power. You get the shape. You see what I did there? You get that? Okay. So it's the opening piece, and it's all different stories of witches, not stereotyped. And one last thing. So this game company, I can't get this game company, it's all on my site. The game company put together this anthology of poetry and stories in their gaming environment. That was way too much fun. Way too much fun. Just saying, random games.
No, wait, did they like insert the poems into
No,
the game?
what they did is they gave us the development environment where people can write games in their environment. And I just like cruised through it and came up with a poem, and it was like amazing, fun universe. Crazy.
Okay, so Paul, bringing up the rear, do you have any announcements today?
So this week I had a new 9,000 word short story published by Amazon Original Stories. It's called In Bloom. If you're a Prime member, I think it's free. Otherwise, it's like $1.99, and it's a part of a collection called Creature Feature. And so I wrote a story, Joe Hill, Grady Hendrix, Chandler Baker, Jason Mott, and am I leaving out Josh Mallerman? I think I am. Anyway, yeah. So that's out on Amazon. It's right now. It's only an ebook and audio.
Okay, so everyone, just remember, if you want to go get the charity anthology, please do it now, because you only have it's already the end of September. You have 31 days to do it. If you're going to get the audiobook, I've received a piece of news. I haven't told Linda and Angela yet. Linda and Angela are both on the TOC of Giving the Devil His Due. We've just got accepted for a deal for libraries, Overdrive. So right until the middle of the month, libraries will be able to acquire Giving the Devil His Due for much, much less than usual. And we're going to have a deal for everyone else in the second half of October, because it's Domestic Violence Awareness Month. Everybody, it's coming this weekend. It's starting this weekend, and you can go follow us on Facebook, and so that you'll know when to go get your mitts on a copy of the audiobook for much, much less as well. Yes, and also public service announcement. We are no longer on Twitter because Elon Musk took away all our tools. We're not happy. We're not. But we are on Blue Sky. Is anyone else here on Blue Sky? I think everyone's on Blue Sky, right? Right, everyone go to Blue Sky. I think they're giving out a lot more invitations now. So go get an invitation, get on Blue Sky. All your favorite authors are migrating from Twitter to Blue Sky because they've taken away everyone's tools, basically. And I think Musk is going to make everyone pay a fee to access the app formerly known as Twitter. So just a public service announcement, everybody, move to Blue Sky because all your favorite authors are going to be there. Okay, everyone. So thank you, everyone, for joining us for the last session of the year, Read for Pixel session of the year, and the last Read for Pixel session for the 10th anniversary. We hope you will join us again when we have the next live stream series. And we all bid you good day or good night wherever you are in the world.